Number 5. Butter churns. That creamy, golden butter on your table was basically a confession in the Middle Ages. Making butter was hard. You'd churn cream for hours, but sometimes it just wouldn't work, staying liquid no matter what. Medieval people needed an explanation. They weren't going to blame bad technique or warm weather. No, they blamed Margaret from down the road. The belief was that a witch could magically steal the richness from your cream. Your butter failed because a witch's invisible hands took the good stuff. If your neighbor's butter came out perfect every time, that was the smoking gun. She wasn't just skilled, she was stealing your butter's richness for her own. People developed anti-witch rituals, like dropping a red-hot horseshoe into the cream. The burning iron was meant to hurt the witch's invisible hands, a booby trap for supernatural dairy thieves. The reality was simple science. Butter doesn't churn if the cream is too warm. On a hot day, your butter failed. On a cool day, your neighbors succeeded. Instead of checking the temperature, people checked their neighbors for a deal with the devil. Number 4. Potatoes. The thing you eat with every meal was once considered a tool of the devil. When potatoes first arrived in Europe from South America in the 1500s, people were terrified. They grew underground, in the dark. To Europeans, anything from underground came from one place, down there, where the bad guy lives. France banned potatoes for almost 200 years, not because they tasted bad, but because people believed eating one could give you leprosy. The logic was simple and insane. Potatoes looked bumpy and weird. Leprosy made skin look bumpy and weird. Therefore, potatoes caused leprosy. People also thought witches used them in rituals, digging them up at night to bury curses inside them. Apparently, witches had nothing better to do than mess with root vegetables. The church agreed, potatoes aren't in the Bible. If God didn't mention it, it must be from somewhere worse. It took French pharmacist Antoine Parmentier to change minds. He planted a potato field and hired armed guards to protect it by day. At night, he sent the guards home. Locals, assuming anything guarded must be valuable, started stealing the potatoes. He tricked an entire country into eating them. Number 3. Salt. You use it every day, but for most of history, salt was considered magic. Everything rots. Meat, fish, vegetables. It was a fact of life. But rub salt on meat and it lasts for months. To someone who had no idea what bacteria was, that's not chemistry. That's a miracle. Or witchcraft. Salt was stopping decay, so people assumed it had power over evil spirits. If it could stop a fish from rotting, it could stop a demon from entering your house. People threw salt in doorways and put it in coffins to stop the dead from returning. The Catholic Church even used it in baptisms to drive out original sin. You might still perform a salt ritual without knowing it. Ever spill salt and toss a pinch over your left shoulder? The left side was considered the devil's side. Spilling precious salt was bad luck, so you'd throw some over your shoulder to blind the demon waiting there. This knowledge made the village healer valuable but also suspicious. If you knew how to use salt to ward off evil, maybe you also knew how to invite it in. The person who could heal you could also curse you. One bad harvest, and the woman who knew her salt was called a witch. Number 2. Tomatoes. The thing you put on your sandwich was once considered straight-up witchcraft. For approximately 200 years, Europeans refused to eat tomatoes. They called them poison apples, and they weren't entirely wrong to be suspicious. Rich people who ate tomatoes kept dying. A nobleman would eat some for dinner and be dead within weeks. It happened repeatedly, but the tomato wasn't killing anyone. The plates were. Rich Europeans used pewter plates, which were loaded with lead. The high acidity in tomatoes leached lead from the plate into the food. Every time a nobleman ate tomatoes, he was getting a slow dose of poison. Meanwhile, the poor ate off wooden plates. No lead. They ate tomatoes and were fine, while the rich kept dying. The rich looked at this and concluded the tomato must specifically hate wealthy people, which is a very reasonable conclusion if you don't know what lead poisoning is. So for centuries, the tomato was just a decorative plant in European gardens. People grew them, admired them, but refused to eat them. Number 1. Forks. You probably grabbed a fork for dinner without a second thought. But in medieval Europe, that could get you accused of witchcraft. Forks arrived in Europe in the 11th century when a Byzantine princess brought one to Venice. She used it to eat instead of her hands. The church watched this and absolutely lost it. Priests started preaching against the fork from the pulpit, actual sermons about a fork. Their argument, God gave you hands to eat with. Using a metal tool instead meant you thought God's design was flawed, and only the devil would suggest that. So they called forks the devil's tines. To the medieval church, a tiny metal pitchfork was basically Satan's cutlery. The princess who brought the fork to Venice died young from an illness. The church pointed at her death as proof. This lasted for centuries. Well into the 1600s, people avoided forks to not be associated with witchcraft, preferring to eat with their hands than risk being called a devil worshipper. Eventually, forks became normal, and now you can buy a pack of 50 for $2.